Jasmine Wright's cheek stung as the flight attendant's hand connected with her face. Her 6-month-old daughter wailed. Through tears, Jasmine glimpsed her husband Malcolm's expression shifting from shock to controlled fury. The flight attendant didn't know Malcolm wasn't just any passenger. He owned Skyline Airlines. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling. You won't believe how this powerful family turns the tables on systemic racism in the airline industry. The morning had started so perfectly. Jasmine Wright carefully packed the last of baby Zara's necessities into the designer diaper bag, mentally checking off items against her meticulous list. At 32, the accomplished pediatrician had approached motherhood with the same precision she brought to her medical practice. 6-month-old Zara cooed from her bouncer, unaware she was about to embark on her first-ever vacation. "Ready for Bermuda, my little sunshine?" Jasmine tickled Zara's chubby cheeks, earning a toothless grin that never failed to melt her heart. Malcolm Wright entered their bedroom, rolling the last of their matching luggage. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His latest acquisition, Skyline Airlines, had been finalized just 6 months ago, coinciding beautifully with Zara's birth. It was a fact known only to a select few executives, his legal team, and of course, Jasmine. "I still don't understand why you're keeping your ownership quiet," Jasmine said, lifting Zara into her arms. "Wouldn't it be easier to just use the private jet?" Malcolm adjusted his perfectly tailored suit jacket. "That defeats the purpose of buying an airline, honey. I need to experience it as a regular customer would. How else will I know what needs fixing?" His warm brown eyes softened. "Besides, this is Zara's first commercial flight. It's a milestone." What Malcolm didn't say was that he'd received concerning reports about customer treatment disparities. As one of the few black airline owners in the industry, he took these allegations seriously enough to experience the service firsthand before making sweeping changes. 3 hours later, they stood at the Skyline check-in counter, first-class tickets in hand. The attendant's smile froze slightly when the family approached. "First class," she repeated, glancing between their tickets and faces with poorly concealed surprise. "And the infant will be traveling with you in first class as well?" "That's generally how families work," Malcolm replied pleasantly, his tone betraying none of the irritation he felt. "We tend to stay together." The attendant stammered an apology that sounded anything but sincere, then processed their boarding passes with exaggerated care. "Enjoy your premium experience." "First of many," Jasmine whispered, squeezing Malcolm's hand as they walked away. Security presented its own challenges. Despite Malcolm and Jasmine's efficient preparation, laptops out, shoes off, baby formula declared, a TSA agent pulled Jasmine aside for random additional screening. They watched as several white passengers sailed through without the same scrutiny. "It's always random, isn't it?" Malcolm commented to no one in particular, his voice just loud enough to make the agent flush. As they finally approached their gate, Malcolm noticed a flight attendant watching them with unusual intensity. Karen Sutton, as her name tag identified her, was a slender woman in her mid-40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She quickly looked away when Malcolm caught her staring. Boarding began efficiently, first-class passengers called first. As Malcolm and Jasmine approached with their boarding passes, Karen deliberately shifted her attention to passengers behind them. "Excuse me," Malcolm said firmly, extending their boarding passes. "We're in first class." Karen took the passes without making eye contact. "Right this way," she said flatly, making no offer to help with their bags or baby carrier, assistance Malcolm observed her providing to an elderly white couple just moments before. Once settled in their spacious first-class seats, Malcolm whispered to Jasmine, "This might be more educational than I anticipated." Jasmine arranged Zara's blanket. "You knew it would be like this. It's why you wouldn't let the executives announce the acquisition." Malcolm nodded. "Documentation before confrontation." Always. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Malcolm's mind drifted to the charity gala where he'd first met Jasmine 5 years ago. He'd been the keynote speaker, the wunderkind entrepreneur whose technology solutions company had just made the Fortune 500 list. She'd been the brilliant doctor receiving recognition for her pediatric outreach program in underserved communities. Their connection had been instant and profound, two souls who understood the weight of exceeding expectations in spaces that hadn't been designed with them in mind. Champagne or orange juice? Karen's voice snapped him back to the present as she offered pre-flight beverages to the white passengers across the aisle. When she reached their row, she breezed past without slowing, continuing to the next set of passengers. Malcolm caught her eye as she turned. "We were skipped," he stated calmly. "Oh." Karen's expression remained neutral. "I'll circle back." She never did. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Malcolm and Jasmine exchanged glances. This was going to be a long flight. 1 hour into the flight, baby Zara began fussing. The cabin pressure change during ascent had likely caused discomfort in her tiny ears, and despite Jasmine's pediatric expertise, nothing seemed to soothe her. Jasmine offered a pacifier, gently massaged Zara's ears, and cradled her close, whispering soothing words that were drowned out by the infant's increasingly distressed cries. From 3 rows ahead, Karen Sutton's gaze landed on them like a physical weight. Her disapproving stare intensified with each of Zara's wails. Jasmine, acutely aware of the attention, curled her body protectively around her daughter. "Try walking her down the aisle," Malcolm suggested, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'll come with you." Before they could rise, the PA system crackled. Karen's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to remind all passengers that maintaining a peaceful environment is essential for everyone's comfort. If you're experiencing any issues that might disturb others, please use the call button to request assistance." The targeted announcement wasn't subtle. Several passengers turned to look at the Wrights, some with sympathy, others with the same judgment Karen's eyes had conveyed. Jasmine's cheeks burned with humiliation. She might as well have said our names. Across the aisle, a white mother struggled with her fussy toddler. Within moments, another flight attendant appeared with apple juice and crackers, offering suggestions and sympathy. "Pressure changes are so hard on the little ones," the attendant cooed, never once glancing toward Jasmine's similar struggle. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He discreetly removed his phone and began documenting the disparate treatment, careful to keep the volume muted and his actions subtle. "I need some warm water for her formula," Jasmine whispered, pressing the call button. Minutes passed with no response. She pressed it again. Nothing. On the 3rd attempt, a different flight attendant appeared, a young black man whose name tag read, Troy Bennett. His expression was professionally neutral, but his eyes held understanding. "How can I assist you?" he asked. "I've been trying to get some warm water for my daughter's formula," Jasmine explained, relief evident in her voice. "The call button seems to be malfunctioning." Troy nodded. "I'll take care of that right away, ma'am." He returned promptly with the warm water and a soft smile for Zara. "Anything else I can help with?" Before Jasmine could respond, Karen materialized beside Troy, her voice sharp. "Bennett, there are passengers in economy who've been waiting for beverage service. You're neglecting your primary duties." Troy's professional demeanor didn't waver. "Just assisting with a formula request, Ms. Sutton. Heading back now." As he walked away, Karen's gaze lingered coldly on the Wright family before she followed Troy without offering any assistance herself. Malcolm squeezed Jasmine's hand. "This reminds me of my first business flight," he murmured. "I just secured my first $1 million contract. Was wearing my best suit. The flight attendant asked to see my boarding pass 4 times and suggested I might be more comfortable in economy." Jasmine mixed the formula with practiced precision. "What did you do?" A small smile played on Malcolm's lips. "Bought the building his company was headquartered in the following year. Raised everyone's rent except his by 10%. Their quiet laughter drew attention from nearby passengers. An older white woman across the aisle leaned toward them. "Your baby is beautiful," she said warmly. "First flight." The unexpected kindness brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. "Yes, thank you. My grandson was the same way at that age," the woman continued. "Try holding her upright against your shoulder. Sometimes that position helps with the pressure." Jasmine nodded gratefully and adjusted Zara as suggested. The baby's cries softened slightly. Not everyone was as understanding. A businessman 2 rows ahead turned around with an exaggerated sigh. "Some people shouldn't travel with infants if they can't control them. Some people shouldn't speak unless they have something valuable to contribute," Malcolm replied smoothly, his tone pleasant but his eyes hard. The tension was palpable. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably, some pointedly inserting earbuds, others watching the exchange with interest. Malcolm noticed several people filming discreetly with their phones. Karen returned with the beverage cart, serving each first-class passenger with robotic efficiency until she reached the Wrights. As she leaned across to serve Malcolm's seatmate, her elbow accidentally knocked into Malcolm's arm, causing water to spill across his expensive suit jacket. "Oh, I do apologize," Karen said, her voice dripping with insincerity as she handed him a single cocktail napkin for the large spill. Turbulence. The air had been perfectly still. Malcolm dabbed at his soaked sleeve, his expression unchanged. "No problem at all." His calm response seemed to irritate Karen more than anger would have. She pressed her lips together, clearly having expected, perhaps even hoped for, an outburst that would confirm whatever biases she held. "We'll need more napkins," Jasmine said. Karen's smile tightened. "Of course. When I have a moment." She walked away without another glance, never returning with the promised napkins. Zara had finally settled, drowsing against Jasmine's chest after finishing her formula. Malcolm and Jasmine exchanged weary glances, both recognizing they were experiencing exactly the treatment Malcolm had purchased the airline to address. 3 more hours, Malcolm whispered, checking his watch. Just 3 more hours. Neither of them could have predicted how those 3 hours would change their lives forever. 3 hours into the flight, Zara's diaper needed changing. Jasmine gathered their supplies and made her way to the first-class lavatory, balancing the baby on her hip. Inside the cramped space, she discovered the changing table was broken, hanging at an awkward angle from the wall. With no other option, Jasmine was forced to lay a changing pad across the closed toilet seat, performing a precarious diaper change while trying to keep Zara from rolling off the makeshift station. The whole process took twice as long as it should have, with Jasmine contorting herself in the tiny space. When she finally emerged, flushed and frustrated, she found Karen standing outside with an impatient expression. "There's been a complaint about the time you're taking," Karen said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jasmine adjusted Zara on her hip. "The changing table is broken. I had to improvise." "You should have requested assistance," Karen replied dismissively. "From whom?" "You've been ignoring our call button all flight," Jasmine responded, her patience wearing thin. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Please return to your seat promptly." When Jasmine reached their row, she found their situation had somehow deteriorated further. Their carry-on items had been moved from the overhead compartment directly above them to one several rows back. Malcolm's laptop bag and Jasmine's purse, previously tucked under their seats, were now stowed in the seatback pockets in front of them. "What happened to our things?" Jasmine asked, sliding into her seat with Zara. Malcolm's expression was carefully controlled. Apparently, it's airline policy that all personal items must be completely stowed during meal service. According to Ms. Sutton. From the seat behind them, Troy discreetly leaned forward. "That's not actually policy," he whispered. "Especially not in first class." Malcolm nodded almost imperceptibly in acknowledgement. He pressed the call button, his decision made. When Karen arrived, her expression suggested she'd been expecting this confrontation. Yes. I'd like to speak with the head flight attendant, please, Malcolm requested politely. Karen's smile was cold. I am the senior flight attendant on this flight. Then I'd like to file a formal complaint about the treatment my family has received today. If you have concerns, you're welcome to contact customer service after we land, Karen replied dismissively. I have duties to attend to. Malcolm held her gaze. I'm documenting everything, Ms. Sutton. Including the selective enforcement of policies that don't exist. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Karen's face. She glanced at Malcolm's phone, which was indeed recording their interaction. Recording airline staff is against regulations. Actually, Malcolm responded, FAA regulations permit passengers to record video on aircraft as long as it doesn't interfere with crew duties. I've been very careful not to interfere with anything. Jasmine noticed an older white woman watching their interaction intently from a few rows ahead. Something about the woman's focused attention seemed different from the other curious passengers. The woman caught Jasmine's eye and quickly looked away. The tension was interrupted by Zara beginning to cry again, her tiny face reddening with hunger. The confrontation had delayed her next feeding. I need to prepare another bottle, Jasmine said, reaching for the diaper bag. As she began measuring formula powder, Karen's voice came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign as we're expecting some turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats immediately and secure all loose items. Jasmine continued preparing the bottle. The baby's needs couldn't wait for theoretical turbulence that might not materialize for minutes. Karen appeared beside their seats with remarkable speed. Ma'am, I need you to stow that and fasten your seatbelt immediately. I'm just preparing my daughter's formula, Jasmine explained. She needs to eat. It will only take a minute. The captain's orders override your baby's feeding schedule, Karen insisted. Stow those items now. Malcolm intervened. The FAA exempts child care activities from seatbelt requirements when necessary. Feeding an infant qualifies. Karen's nostrils flared. Sir, I won't tell you again. Your wife needs to comply with safety protocols. My wife is a pediatrician who understands both child development needs and airplane safety regulations better than most, Malcolm responded evenly. She's being perfectly reasonable. By now, the confrontation had drawn the attention of everyone in first class. Several passengers had their phones out, recording the escalating situation. The plane showed no signs of turbulence, undermining Karen's urgency. If you continue to disrupt this flight, Karen threatened, leaning closer, I'll be forced to take action. What action? Jasmine asked, continuing to prepare the bottle while keeping her voice calm for Zara's sake. For feeding my hungry child. Karen's eyes darted between the recording phones and the Wrights. She seemed to realize she'd created a scene but appeared unwilling to back down. This is your final warning. The older woman who had been watching them intently shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her expression troubled as she observed Karen's behavior. Zara's cries intensified, her tiny body rigid with hunger. Jasmine finished preparing the bottle and cradled her daughter, offering the formula. She's eating now. We're all settled. Rather than defusing the situation, this seemed to push Karen over some invisible edge. Her face flushed with anger as she reached toward Jasmine. Give me the baby. I'll hold her while you stow your items properly. Jasmine recoiled, instinctively shielding Zara. Absolutely not. Don't touch my child. The first-class cabin went completely silent except for Zara's cries. Everyone watched as the confrontation reached its breaking point. Karen's face contorted with rage as Jasmine pulled away from her outstretched hands. I said give me the baby, she demanded, fingers grasping at Zara's tiny form. It's for her safety. No. Jasmine clutched her daughter tighter, turning her body to shield the infant. Don't touch her. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Karen's right hand swung out in a wide arc, connecting with Jasmine's left cheek with a crack that echoed throughout the hushed cabin. The force snapped Jasmine's head to the side, nearly causing her to lose her grip on Zara. "You were becoming hysterical," Karen stated coldly into the stunned silence. It was necessary for flight safety. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Zara's cries intensified as she sensed her mother's distress. A red handprint bloomed on Jasmine's dark skin, tears welling in her shocked eyes. Malcolm rose slowly from his seat, his calm demeanor transformed into something far more intimidating. His voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet. "You just assaulted my wife while she was holding our child." Karen took a step back, suddenly aware of the dozens of phones recording the incident. She was non-compliant with safety instructions. "I was following protocol for disruptive passengers." Malcolm's laugh held no humor. "Protocol?" He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, handing it to Karen. "Malcolm Wright, majority owner and CEO of Skyline Airlines. Tell me more about this protocol that allows staff to strike passengers." The color drained from Karen's face as she stared at the card. Around them, passengers gasped and whispered. Someone applauded. The cabin erupted in chaos as people processed what they'd just witnessed. "That's right," Malcolm continued, his voice carrying over the commotion. "You just slapped the wife of your boss while she was holding his child." Troy rushed forward, positioning himself protectively near Jasmine and Zara. "Sir, ma'am, let me help you to the crew rest area where you can have some privacy. We'll get some ice for Mrs. Wright's face." Karen seemed frozen in place, her carefully constructed authority crumbling. "I didn't." "You can't. This is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding captured on at least 20 cameras," Malcolm noted, gesturing to the phones still recording. "Including the aircraft's security system." The older woman who had been watching them intently suddenly stood and pushed past other passengers, heading toward the front of the plane. Something about her urgency caught Malcolm's attention. Over the PA system, the captain's voice broke through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an incident in the cabin, we'll be making an emergency landing in Cleveland. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Crew, prepare for landing in 30 minutes. Karen finally broke from her stupor, her face transforming from shock to calculated indignation. "He's lying. Check his ID. Anyone could print a business card." But Malcolm was already on his satellite phone, a privilege of first-class passengers. "This is Malcolm Wright. Authorization code Alpha, Tango, 973. Connect me to the board immediately." His voice was steady, but fury radiated from every syllable. "We have a situation." Karen backed away, then turned and fled toward the crew area at the front of the plane. Jasmine sat trembling, holding Zara close while trying to soothe her. The red mark on her cheek was darkening into what would become a bruise. "Malcolm," she whispered, "everyone's watching." Troy brought ice wrapped in a cloth napkin. "Mrs. Wright, I'm so sorry this happened. I've been documenting Ms. Sutton's behavior toward minority passengers for months, but HR keeps dismissing the reports." Malcolm's attention snapped to Troy. "HR dismisses them? Who specifically?" "Elaine Sutton, the HR director." Troy hesitated. "Karen's mother." Malcolm's expression darkened further as pieces clicked into place. The older woman who had been watching them so intently, could that have been Elaine Sutton? Is that why she rushed to the front after Karen's assault was revealed? As Malcolm comforted Jasmine and processed this new information, he recalled the stack of complaint reports he'd seen during acquisition reviews. Reports flagged as resolved that now seemed suspect. How many other passengers had endured similar treatment? How deeply did this corruption run in the company he'd purchased? Was this all happening because you're black? Do you believe Karen would have treated a white family the same way? Comment number 1 if you think racial bias was clearly at play here, or number 2 if you think the flight attendant was just having a bad day. Would you have revealed you owned the airline earlier, or waited like Malcolm did to document everything? Hit that like button if you would have stood your ground like Jasmine did to protect her baby. Subscribe to see what happens when this family decides to fight back against a system designed to silence them. But here's the real question: what will happen when the plane lands and the world sees what really happened on Skyline Flight 1267? The descent into Cleveland Hopkins International Airport was tense. Karen had barricaded herself in the forward crew area, refusing to emerge despite the captain's orders. Troy and the remaining flight attendants managed the cabin professionally, ensuring passengers were prepared for landing while keeping a respectful distance from the Wright family. Malcolm remained on his satellite phone, his voice low but authoritative as he spoke with Skyline executives. Jasmine sat silently beside him, ice pack pressed to her cheek, her free arm cradling Zara, who had finally exhausted herself into sleep. "I don't care about protocol," Malcolm said into the phone. "I want her employment terminated the moment this plane touches down. And I want Elaine Sutton in my office tomorrow morning." When the plane finally landed and taxied to the gate, Malcolm ended his call and turned to Jasmine. "The police will board first. Airport security has been notified of the situation." Jasmine nodded, her medical training kicking in despite her personal trauma. "The bruising is developing. We should document it properly for the report." True to Malcolm's word, the aircraft door opened to reveal 3 police officers rather than the usual ground crew. What Malcolm hadn't anticipated was their approach. Instead of proceeding to the crew area where Karen remained hidden, the lead officer moved directly toward Malcolm, hand resting on his holster. "Sir, we need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands visible," the officer instructed, his tone suggesting Malcolm was the aggressor rather than the victim's husband. Before Malcolm could respond, the businessman who had complained about Zara's crying earlier stood up. "Officers, you've got it wrong. This man's wife was assaulted by the flight attendant. We all saw it." He held up his phone. "I've got it all on video." A chorus of agreement rose from surrounding passengers. Phones appeared from all directions, passengers eager to share their footage. The officers' attention shifted as they realized they'd been given incorrect information. "The flight attendant is in the forward galley," Troy informed them, stepping forward. "She struck Mrs. Wright across the face while Mrs. Wright was holding their baby." The officer's demeanor changed immediately. 2 proceeded to the front of the aircraft while 1 remained with the Wrights, now apologetic. "Sir, ma'am, we'll need statements from both of you." As they deplaned, the airport terminal was a scene of controlled chaos. News crews had already gathered, alerted by passengers' social media posts about the emergency landing involving Skyline's owner. Camera flashes erupted as Malcolm guided Jasmine through the terminal, security personnel creating a protective barrier around them. "Mr. Wright. Is it true you purchased Skyline 6 months ago? Mrs. Wright. Did the flight attendant really strike you? Was this racially motivated?" Malcolm raised a hand to quiet the barrage of questions. "My wife needs medical attention. We'll make a statement later." Airport medical staff escorted them to a private room where a doctor examined Jasmine's injury and documented it for the police report. Outside, they could hear the commotion as Karen was escorted through the terminal in handcuffs, still shouting protestations. "I was defending myself. She was out of control. You don't understand." Malcolm's phone buzzed continuously with calls from board members, executives, and the company's crisis management team. Skyline stock was already plummeting as videos of the assault spread across social media platforms. #SkylineSlap was trending nationally. Troy knocked on the door of the medical room, entering with his uniform jacket removed. "Mr. Wright? I've given my statement to the police. I wanted to check on Mrs. Wright and the baby." "We appreciate that, Troy," Malcolm said, extending his hand. "Your intervention on the flight made a difference." Troy shook his hand firmly. "It's been happening for too long, sir. Ms. Sutton has a history of treating passengers of color differently. I've filed reports, other crew members have filed reports, but they always disappear once they reach HR. Elaine Sutton, Malcolm said, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. Yes, sir. She's been with the company for 20 years. She's protected her daughter through at least a dozen similar incidents that I know of. Jasmine looked up from where she was nursing Zara. That woman who was watching us on the plane, older, gray blonde hair, expensive jewelry, could that have been her? Troy's eyes widened. That sounds like her. Was she in first class? She never flies commercial unless she's checking on Karen. Malcolm's phone rang again, the company's legal counsel. He excused himself to take the call in the corner of the room. The police are charging her with assault, the lawyer informed him. But she's claiming self-defense, saying Mrs. Wright became physically aggressive when asked to comply with safety instructions. There are dozens of witnesses and videos proving otherwise, Malcolm responded. Yes, but there's another issue. Elaine Sutton was on the flight. She's already meeting with board members, claiming you set her daughter up to create a publicity stunt. She's saying you never revealed your ownership because you planned to provoke an incident. Malcolm nearly laughed at the absurdity. I kept my ownership private to experience the airline as a regular customer. A standard practice. Standard or not, she's rallying support. Several board members are concerned about the stock price and public relations damage. They're suggesting a quick, quiet settlement. They want to settle with a woman who assaulted my wife. Malcolm's voice rose enough that Jasmine looked up in concern. Absolutely not. After ending the call, Malcolm rejoined Jasmine and Troy. Karen's been arrested, but she's claiming self-defense. And apparently, that was indeed Elaine Sutton on our flight. She's already spinning this against us. Jasmine's expression hardened. She watched her daughter slap me, and she's defending it. Not just defending it, she's claiming we orchestrated the whole thing. Malcolm ran a hand over his face. The board is worried about stock prices. They want to settle quietly. Settle? Jasmine's voice was incredulous. Malcolm, she struck me while I was holding our child. What message would settling send to other passengers who've been mistreated? What message would it send to Zara when she's old enough to understand? Troy shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Wright, if you're fighting this, you should know there's more. Karen has had issues with other black passengers. Last year, she had a black teenager removed from a flight for suspicious behavior. He was reading a physics textbook. Malcolm's determination solidified. Troy, would you be willing to go on record with everything you've witnessed? Already did with the police, Troy affirmed. And I'll testify if needed. As they prepared to leave for a hotel, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a news alert. He opened it to find Karen on screen, somehow already released on bail, giving a tearful interview outside the police station. I was just doing my job, she sobbed into the camera. I've served passengers for 15 years without a complaint. This wealthy family didn't like being told to follow safety rules, and now they're using their power to destroy my life. The interviewer asked, "Do you regret striking Mrs. Wright?" Karen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I regret that it came to that. I was protecting other passengers. Anyone would have done the same if they felt threatened. Malcolm turned off the phone, disgusted. She's playing victim, and the media's giving her a platform. Of course they are, Jasmine said quietly. It's a familiar script. Paint the black woman as aggressive and uncontrollable. Make the white woman seem vulnerable and reasonable. As they were escorted to a waiting car, Malcolm received another call, this time from a board member he'd considered an ally. Malcolm, I have to be straight with you. This is looking bad. Stocks down 18%. Customers are canceling bookings. Some are saying they're uncomfortable with an angry black man running the airline. Malcolm's grip tightened on the phone. An angry black man? My wife was assaulted. I know. It's terrible. But business is business. The board is meeting tomorrow. You might want to consider stepping back temporarily while this blows over." The call ended, leaving Malcolm stunned. In less than 8 hours, he had gone from respected CEO to a liability in the eyes of his own board. As their car pulled away from the airport, Malcolm and Jasmine sat in silence, the weight of their new reality settling between them. This wasn't just about one flight attendant's racist action anymore. They were up against an entire system designed to protect itself, a system that would rather sacrifice them than acknowledge its failures. "What are we going to do?" Jasmine finally asked. Malcolm took her hand, his resolve strengthening. "We're going to fight. Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been in our position without the resources to stand up for themselves." What neither of them knew was that the battle had only just begun. 1 week after the incident, Malcolm stood in his home office staring at the television in disbelief. Karen Sutton, immaculately dressed and composed, sat across from a sympathetic interviewer on a national morning show. "I've dedicated my life to customer service," Karen said, her voice breaking just enough to appear genuine. 15 years of perfect evaluations, destroyed in an instant because I enforced safety protocols." The interviewer nodded encouragingly. "Take us through what happened from your perspective." Karen dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. "The infant was crying throughout the flight, which is understandable. Babies cry. But when I announced the seatbelt sign was on, Mrs. Wright refused to comply. She became belligerent, using profanity." "That's a damn lie." Malcolm shouted at the screen. "When I tried to assist with the baby so she could secure herself properly," Karen continued, "she jerked away violently. I reached out instinctively to stabilize myself and prevent the baby from being jostled. That's when my hand made contact with her face. It was completely unintentional." The interviewer turned to the camera with a serious expression. "We should note that Skyline Airlines has suspended Karen pending investigation, though no formal charges have been filed yet." Malcolm muted the television as Jasmine entered the room, Zara on her hip. "They're painting you as aggressive," he said grimly. "And they're lying about the charges. She was arrested for assault." "I saw it trending on social media," Jasmine replied, her voice hollow. "People are asking what I did to provoke her." The bruise on Jasmine's cheek had faded to a yellowish shadow, but the emotional wound remained raw. Since returning home, she'd received hundreds of messages, some supportive, but many vicious, accusing her of everything from entitlement to manufacturing the incident for financial gain. Malcolm's phone rang. It was William Turner, the civil rights attorney he'd retained. "Turn on GNN," Turner said without preamble. "Elaine Sutton is making a statement." Malcolm switched channels to find Elaine Sutton standing at a podium, the Skyline logo visible behind her. Her gray blonde hair was perfectly styled, her expression one of professional concern. "As Skyline's Director of Human Resources for 20 years, I've always prioritized fair treatment for both our employees and passengers," she began. "The incident last week was unfortunate and is being thoroughly investigated. However, I must address the troubling pattern of behavior demonstrated by Mr. Wright since his acquisition of Skyline." Malcolm's blood ran cold. Beside him, Jasmine gasped. Mr. Wright concealed his ownership from staff, creating a hostile environment by secretly evaluating employees without their knowledge, a violation of company policy he himself approved, Elaine continued. Furthermore, his aggressive behavior toward Ms. Sutton, a dedicated employee attempting to maintain safety protocols, suggests a concerning temperament for someone in leadership. The press conference continued with Elaine introducing several board members who expressed grave concerns about Malcolm's fitness for leadership during this volatile time. They announced Malcolm would be taking a voluntary leave of absence while the board managed the crisis, a decision Malcolm had never agreed to. "They can't do this," Jasmine said, bouncing an increasingly fussy Zara. "Can they?" Malcolm's phone exploded with notifications. News alerts, messages from executives, and an email from the board chair requesting his resignation, for the good of the company. "They're staging a coup," Malcolm said in disbelief. using this incident to push me out. His attorney's voice came through the phone he'd forgotten was still connected. Malcolm, this is coordinated. They were ready with this narrative. We need to meet immediately. By the time Malcolm arrived at Turner's office downtown, the situation had deteriorated further. Troy Bennett had been terminated for unrelated violations of company policy, specifically, unauthorized communication with media. The security footage from the flight had been deemed corrupted during download and was unavailable for the investigation. They're erasing evidence and silencing witnesses, Turner said, spreading documents across his desk. But they made mistakes. Troy recorded conversations with HR over the past year documenting his complaints about Karen. And at least 30 passengers have come forward with video footage. Malcolm loosened his tie, feeling the walls closing in. What about the board? They're making decisions without proper authority. Turner slid a document across the desk. According to the acquisition agreement, they can temporarily limit your operational control during a PR crisis if a supermajority votes to do so. Elaine's been busy. She's been planning this, Malcolm realized. But why? What does she gain by protecting her daughter at the cost of the company's reputation? Turner pulled up an email on his computer. This might explain it. One of my associates found SEC filings showing Elaine and several board members sold significant shares 3 days before your flight. Before the incident? That's impossible unless... Malcolm's eyes widened. Unless they knew something would happen. Exactly. They couldn't have known Karen would slap Jasmine, but they might have known Karen had a history of confrontations with black passengers in first class. Put her on a flight with you, wait for a confrontation, sell before it happens. Insider trading based on predicted racism, Malcolm said bitterly. That's a new low. When Malcolm returned home that evening, he found Jasmine in tears, her laptop open to a social media page filled with hateful comments. Someone had created a hashtag boycott right medicine, targeting her pediatric practice with fabricated complaints. My office received threatening calls today, she said, wiping her eyes. The hospital administration suggested I take a leave of absence until this blows over. My own colleagues are distancing themselves. Malcolm sat beside her, pulling her close. I'm so sorry, Jasmine. This is because of me, because I bought that airline. No, she said firmly, surprising him with her intensity. This is because a racist flight attendant couldn't stand seeing a black family in first class and assumed we didn't belong there. This is because her mother protected that behavior for years. This is because an entire corporate structure exists to shield them, not us. Malcolm nodded slowly. You're right. And they're counting on us to give up, to take their settlement and disappear. What settlement? Malcolm hadn't told her yet. The board authorized Elaine to offer us $5 million to sign NDAs and walk away. No criminal charges, no public statements, no reforms. Jasmine stood abruptly, causing Zara to stir in her nearby bassinet. They think we can be bought. They think we'll let them sweep this under the rug so Karen can keep abusing passengers and Elaine can keep covering it up. No, Malcolm said, standing to join her. They've drastically underestimated who they're dealing with. That night, after Jasmine and Zara were asleep, Malcolm returned to his office and began a systematic review of everything he'd learned about Skyline since the acquisition. Something in the employee handbook caught his attention, a policy called Passenger Profile Protocol that outlined criteria for identifying potentially disruptive passengers requiring enhanced monitoring. The criteria included passengers who question crew authority repeatedly, appear agitated during boarding, request special accommodations multiple times, and most damning, present inconsistently with their ticketed class of service. The last criterion had an example in parentheses, e.g., casual attire in first class. Malcolm dug deeper, requesting data from IT showing how often this protocol was invoked. The results were staggering. Black passengers were flagged under this protocol at 8 times the rate of white passengers. Latino passengers at 5 times. Asian passengers at 3 times. Institutionalized discrimination, codified in company policy, signed off by Elaine Sutton herself 5 years earlier. As dawn broke, Malcolm made 3 calls, one to William Turner sharing his discovery, one to a journalist he trusted at the Washington Post, and one to Troy Bennett. They think they can beat us by attacking our reputations and pressuring us to settle, he told Jasmine over breakfast. But they've given us exactly what we need to fight back, proof that this was never about one flight attendant or one incident. It's about a corrupt system designed to fail people who look like us. Jasmine reached across the table, taking his hand. So what's our next move? Malcolm's expression was resolute. We build an army. Malcolm sat at the head of the conference table in William Turner's law office, surrounded by allies gathered over the past week. To his right sat Jasmine, composed and determined despite the storms surrounding them. To his left was Troy Bennett, who had risked everything by coming forward. Across from them sat Alexandria James, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate malfeasance, and Dr. Raymond Carter, a data scientist specializing in pattern recognition. Let's review what we know, Malcolm began, his voice steady. Skyline has a documented policy of profiling passengers based on criteria that disproportionately targets people of color. Karen Sutton has a history of confrontations with minority passengers that her mother, HR Director Elaine Sutton, systematically buried. And several board members sold stocks days before our incident, suggesting they anticipated negative publicity. Alexandria tapped her pen against her notepad. The profiling policy is our strongest angle. I've received flight manifests from Troy showing how frequently it's been invoked. The racial disparity is undeniable. What about the stock sales? Jasmine asked. That's where it gets interesting, William replied. We've confirmed that 5 board members, including Elaine, sold significant holdings 3 days before your flight. The SEC has agreed to investigate based on the evidence we provided. Troy leaned forward. I've been contacted by 23 former colleagues, flight attendants, gate agents, even pilots, who witnessed similar incidents. They were all silenced through NDAs or threatened with termination. Malcolm nodded. And I've found 7 passengers who filed formal complaints about Karen in the past year alone. All were told their issues were resolved with no further action. The strategy was taking shape. Document the pattern, expose the system, build a coalition of witnesses, and present an irrefutable case not just against Karen Sutton but against the corporate culture that enabled her. While Malcolm coordinated the legal and investigative efforts, Jasmine faced her own battles. Her decision to return to her pediatric practice was met with mixed reactions. Some colleagues avoided her, uncomfortable with the controversy. Others expressed quiet support. Her patients' families were similarly divided. Dr. Wright? A nurse poked her head into Jasmine's office during lunch. There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. The visitor was a black woman in her early 30s, professional and composed. Dr. Wright, my name is Tanya Phillips. I was on Skyline Flight 889 last month. Karen Sutton had me removed because my 3-year-old son was too active during boarding. We were flying first class using miles I'd saved for years for his birthday trip. Jasmine invited her to sit. I'm so sorry that happened to you. When I saw what happened to you. Tanya's composure cracked slightly. I filed a complaint after our incident. They offered me vouchers and said they'd address it internally. Now I know what that meant, nothing. Tanya wasn't alone. Throughout the week, Jasmine encountered others with similar stories. A black businessman removed for suspicious behavior while working on his laptop. A Latina mother questioned repeatedly about her first-class ticket. An Asian family subjected to extra baggage checks that white passengers didn't face. Jasmine connected these individuals with Malcolm's growing coalition, each story strengthening their case against Skyline's discriminatory practices. Meanwhile, Malcolm faced increasing pressure from the board. They raised their settlement offer to $10 million, then $15 million, each time with stricter confidentiality terms. Each time, Malcolm refused. "They're getting desperate," William observed after the latest offer. "But they're also getting dangerous. My sources say they're planning to vote on removing you permanently, claiming breach of fiduciary duty." "On what grounds?" Malcolm demanded. "They're arguing that by pursuing this publicly rather than settling, you're intentionally damaging the company's value. The stock has dropped 26% since the incident." Malcolm had anticipated this move. "What they don't know is that I've been meeting with individual shareholders, showing them evidence of the board's insider trading and cover-up of discriminatory practices. Many are as disturbed by the corruption as they are by the stock price." The counterattack extended beyond legal and corporate channels. Alexandria's preliminary reporting had caught the attention of civil rights organizations, consumer advocacy groups, and even congressional staffers interested in airline passenger protections. Troy had become the public face of employee resistance, appearing on news programs to describe the culture of discrimination he'd witnessed. "The problem isn't just one flight attendant," he explained during one interview. "It's a system that trained her to view certain passengers as inherently suspicious based on their appearance." Despite these advances, the opposition remained formidable. Elaine Sutton had decades of institutional knowledge and loyalty within Skyline. She'd begun a whisper campaign painting Malcolm as an opportunistic outsider seeking to dismantle the company for personal gain. Karen remained free on bail, her attorney arguing that the charges should be reduced to simple misconduct. Her tearful interviews continued, each one subtly shifting the narrative to portray herself as the victim of cancel culture and corporate politics. The most challenging moment came when Malcolm discovered a dossier had been compiled on him, containing everything from business deals that had gone sour to personal arguments with colleagues taken out of context. Someone had even tracked down a college girlfriend willing to describe him as controlling and intimidating during their relationship. "They're trying to destroy your credibility," William warned. "Make you look like an angry, aggressive black man who bullies people. Classic character assassination." Jasmine faced similar attacks. Anonymous reviews appeared on medical rating sites claiming she was cold, dismissive of concerns, and seemed distracted with her phone during appointments, all thinly veiled attempts to suggest she was the aggressive, inattentive mother Karen had described. The pressure was taking its toll. Jasmine woke from nightmares of hands reaching for Zara. Malcolm worked late into the night, reviewing documents until the words blurred together. They hired security after receiving threats at their home. "Maybe we should take the settlement," Jasmine suggested during a particularly difficult evening. "For Zara's sake." Malcolm sat beside her on their sofa, taking her hand. "If we settle, nothing changes. Karen might lose her job, but the system that empowered her remains intact. The next family won't have our resources to fight back." Jasmine rested her head on his shoulder. "I know. But sometimes I just want our normal life back." "We will get it back," Malcolm promised. "But better than before, because we won't have to wonder if we're being treated differently because of our skin color, at least not on Skyline." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Elaine Sutton's executive assistant, a young woman named Diane Ramos, contacted William Turner with a stunning revelation. "Ms. Sutton instructed me to delete emails regarding passenger complaints against her daughter," Diane explained in William's office. "But I never actually deleted them. I kept backups of everything." The emails proved devastating: explicit instructions from Elaine to bury complaints against Karen, conversations with board members about keeping Malcolm in the dark regarding discrimination issues, and most damning, an email sent the day before the Wright's flight assigning Karen to first-class service specifically because the passenger manifest showed W.E.B. Du Bois Foundation members would be traveling in premium cabins. Malcolm and Jasmine were listed in the email, their status as foundation members flagged by the system. "They targeted us deliberately," Malcolm realized. "They didn't know I owned the airline, but they knew we were black professionals likely to receive poor treatment." Armed with this evidence, Malcolm called an emergency board meeting. As the directors filed in, their expressions ranged from hostile to nervous. Elaine Sutton arrived last, her confidence faltering slightly when she saw Diane seated beside Malcolm's legal team. "Before we begin the vote on my removal," Malcolm said calmly, "I believe the board should review some new information that's come to light." The next 3 hours changed everything. Email by email, testimony by testimony, Malcolm and his team presented irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination, corporate cover-up, and potential criminal misconduct by board members involved in insider trading. By meeting's end, 3 board members had resigned on the spot. Elaine Sutton was suspended pending investigation. And the remaining directors unanimously voted to retain Malcolm as CEO with expanded authority to reform the company. Outside the boardroom, Malcolm faced a sea of reporters. Rather than avoid them as he had for weeks, he stepped to the microphones with Jasmine at his side. "Today marks a turning point for Skyline Airlines," he began. "We've uncovered troubling evidence of discriminatory practices that betrayed our passengers' trust and violated our core values. Starting immediately, we're implementing comprehensive reforms to ensure every passenger is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, accent, or background." As cameras flashed and questions flew, Malcolm felt a weight lifting. The fight wasn't over. Karen's criminal case remained pending, lawsuits from other passengers were being prepared, and rebuilding Skyline's culture would take years. But for the first time since that terrible moment when Karen's hand struck Jasmine's face, the path forward was clear. The system had fought back with everything it had. And lost. The courthouse steps teemed with reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers as Malcolm and Jasmine arrived for the first day of Karen Sutton's criminal trial. 3 months had passed since the incident, but public interest had only intensified as Alexandria's investigative series, Above the Clouds, Below the Law, exposed Skyline's discriminatory practices in devastating detail. Inside, the courtroom was divided. On one side sat supporters wearing flight attendant union pins, holding signs reading, "Safety First" and "Support Airline Crew." On the other side, a more diverse group wore buttons with an airplane silhouette and the words, "Dignity in Flight," the slogan of the passenger rights organization Malcolm and Jasmine had founded. Karen sat beside her attorney, Gregory Walters, a silver-haired litigator known for representing clients in high-profile cases. She wore a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back in a modest bun, the picture of professional restraint, a stark contrast to Jasmine's memories of her rage-contorted face. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Vanessa Chen, outlined the state's case succinctly. "This is about a flight attendant who physically assaulted a mother holding her infant child. Ms. Sutton's actions were not only criminal but represented the culmination of a pattern of discriminatory behavior toward passengers of color." Walters countered with an opening statement that set the tone for Karen's defense. "My client was following her training to maintain cabin safety during potential turbulence." Mrs. Wright became combative when asked to comply with standard safety protocols, creating a situation where Ms. Sutton had to act decisively to protect the infant and other passengers. The strategy was clear: portray Karen as a dedicated professional following procedures, shift blame to Jasmine, and avoid any mention of racial bias. As the trial progressed, video evidence from multiple passengers played on screens throughout the courtroom. The footage was damning, showing Karen's escalating hostility and the unmistakable moment her hand struck Jasmine's face. Gasps echoed through the gallery despite the judge's warnings for silence. Troy Bennett's testimony proved particularly powerful. "In my 4 years working alongside Ms. Sutton, I observed her apply different standards to passengers based on their race," he stated firmly. "White passengers received assistance and accommodation. Black and brown passengers received scrutiny and suspicion." Walters attacked Troy's credibility, suggesting he was bitter about being fired and currying favor with Malcolm for future employment. Troy remained unshaken, producing his documented complaints to HR that predated the incident by months. The most dramatic moment came when Elaine Sutton took the stand, called by the prosecution after agreeing to testify in exchange for immunity in the ongoing SEC investigation. Her testimony revealed the extent of the corruption. "Yes, I protected my daughter. Yes, I dismissed complaints against her. I believed I was supporting family, but I enabled behavior that violated everything our company should stand for. Under Walter's cross-examination, Elaine admitted something even more disturbing. Skyline's training materials contained coded language about identifying passengers requiring additional monitoring with criteria that effectively targeted non-white travelers. The training never explicitly mentioned race, she acknowledged. But the examples and role-playing scenarios predominantly featured passengers of color as the difficult customers. Outside the courtroom, public opinion split along predictable lines. Conservative commentators questioned why one regrettable incident warranted a criminal trial. Liberal pundits highlighted the case as emblematic of everyday racism faced by people of color. Social media exploded with hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #BoycottSkyline. Alexandria's reporting continued to drive the national conversation. Her latest bombshell revealed that some board members had not only sold stocks before the incident but had purchased put options, essentially betting that Skyline stock would fall. The SEC investigation had expanded to include potential securities fraud. Midway through the trial, Malcolm received an unexpected visitor at Skyline headquarters, Gregory Walters, Karen's attorney, requesting a private meeting. "My client is suffering," Walters began once they were alone. "Her career is over, her reputation destroyed. This trial is taking a tremendous toll on her health and finances." Malcolm remained expressionless. "I imagine being slapped in front of dozens of witnesses while holding your infant child is also quite traumatic, Mr. Walters. What's your point?" Walters slid a document across the desk. "We're prepared to offer a settlement. Ms. Sutton will plead guilty to a reduced charge of disorderly conduct, make a public apology, and commit to anti-bias training. In exchange, your family signs this non-disclosure agreement and issues a joint statement about moving forward constructively." Malcolm glanced at the document without touching it. "And the other passengers who've come forward? The employees who faced retaliation? The systematic discrimination built into Skyline's policies? This NDA would silence us on all of it. This could all go away quietly," Walters pressed. "Your stock would recover. Your family could return to normalcy." Malcolm stood, indicating the meeting was over. "Mr. Walters, what happened to my wife wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of a system designed to fail people who look like us. We're not interested in making this go away quietly. We want it on the record, in full public view, so it never happens again." That evening, Malcolm shared the settlement offer with Jasmine as they sat in their home library, Zara sleeping peacefully in her nursery upstairs. $15 million, Jasmine said quietly, looking at the figure. "Plus legal fees." Malcolm nodded. "And our silence." Jasmine stared into the middle distance, absently touching her cheek where the bruise had long since faded. "You know, before all this happened, I used to prepare my patients' parents for the world their children would face. I'd tell them about the importance of confidence, of knowing their rights, of documenting mistreatment." She looked directly at Malcolm. "But I always added that sometimes, you have to pick your battles. That sometimes, the system is too big to fight." "And now?" Malcolm asked. "Now I think about what I'll tell Zara when she's old enough to understand what happened. Will I tell her we took the money and stayed quiet? Or will I tell her we stood our ground even when it was hard, even when they tried to destroy us, because some principles matter more than comfort?" Their decision was unanimous. The next morning, Malcolm informed Walters they were rejecting the offer. As the trial entered its final phase, Karen finally took the stand. Under gentle questioning from her attorney, she presented herself as a dedicated professional who had reacted instinctively to protect a child during a high-stress situation. During cross-examination, ADH methodically dismantled this narrative. "Ms. Sutton, in your 15 years as a flight attendant, how many other passengers have you struck?" "None," Karen admitted. "This was an extraordinary circumstance. And how many of those extraordinary circumstances involved first-class passengers who were white? Karen's composure cracked. This isn't about race. It's about safety protocols and an uncooperative passenger. Yet the aircraft's black box recording shows no announcement of turbulence from the cockpit before you demanded Mrs. Wright stow her items. Why is that? As questioning continued, Karen grew increasingly defensive until finally, under relentless pressure, she snapped, if they had behaved like they belonged in first class instead of acting entitled, none of this would have happened. The courtroom fell silent. Karen's attorney closed his eyes in defeat. No further questions, Chen said quietly. In the gallery, Jasmine reached for Malcolm's hand. The mask had finally slipped, revealing the truth they had known all along. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. On the charge of assault in the 3rd degree, we find the defendant, Karen Sutton, guilty. The foreperson's words echoed through the hushed courtroom. Karen's shoulders slumped as the verdict was read, her attorney placing a steadying hand on her arm. Across the aisle, Jasmine exhaled slowly, tears welling in her eyes as Malcolm embraced her. Judge Harriet Watkins adjusted her glasses. Sentencing will be scheduled for 2 weeks from today. Defendant will remain free on bail until that time. As the court adjourned, reporters rushed for the exits, racing to break the news. Outside, a crowd had gathered, erupting in cheers when Malcolm and Jasmine emerged. They approached the microphones set up on the courthouse steps, cameras flashing around them. Today, justice was served not just for my family, but for every passenger who has ever been mistreated because of how they look, Malcolm began. This case was never about one incident or one employee. It was about challenging a system that normalized discrimination and punished those who spoke against it. Jasmine stepped forward. We had the resources and platform to fight back. Many don't. That's why we're announcing the official launch of the Dignity in Flight Foundation, dedicated to ensuring equitable treatment for all air travelers and supporting those who experience discrimination. The crowd applauded as they concluded their brief statement and declined further questions. As they made their way to their waiting car, a reporter called out, "Mr. Wright, will you be firing all the employees involved in the cover-up?" Malcolm turned back. "No. We'll be retraining them. Systemic problems require systemic solutions, not just removing a few individuals. Skyline is implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, revising our passenger interaction protocols, and establishing an independent oversight committee to review complaints." 2 weeks later, Karen Sutton received her sentence: 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood, and mandatory participation in an intensive anti-bias education program. Outside the courtroom, Walters announced Karen would not appeal the verdict. "My client acknowledges her actions were inappropriate and is committed to learning from this experience," he stated mechanically, Karen standing silently beside him. For Elaine Sutton, the consequences were primarily professional. Her cooperation with prosecutors spared her criminal charges, but the SEC investigation into insider trading resulted in substantial fines. More significantly, her reputation in corporate America was irreparably damaged. The woman who had built a career on protecting the status quo found herself unemployable at the executive level. At Skyline headquarters, Malcolm faced the enormous task of rebuilding the company's culture and reputation. He started by appointing Troy Bennett as the new Director of Passenger Experience and Inclusion, a senior position reporting directly to him. "First order of business," Troy said during their initial meeting, spreading documents across Malcolm's desk. "I've identified 43 employees who filed complaints about discriminatory practices that were ignored. I recommend we contact each one, acknowledge the failure, and where appropriate, offer reinstatement with back pay." Malcolm approved the plan immediately. Next came a comprehensive review of all company policies, eliminating the problematic passenger profile protocol and replacing it with clear, objective standards for addressing genuine safety concerns. The training curriculum underwent a complete overhaul. Malcolm brought in experts in implicit bias, cultural competency, and conflict resolution. Every employee, from executives to ground crew, participated in workshops designed to recognize and counteract unconscious prejudice. "We're not just trying to prevent another incident," Malcolm explained to shareholders during a tense meeting. "We're trying to create the most inclusive airline in the industry. Not just because it's right, but because it's good business. Passengers who feel respected become loyal customers." Some shareholders remained skeptical, pointing to the continued stock price depression and cancelled bookings. Others recognized the long-term vision, expressing confidence that addressing the underlying issues would ultimately strengthen the company. Jasmine, meanwhile, channeled her experience into expanding the Dignity in Flight Foundation. With Alexandria's investigative series generating national attention, hundreds of travelers came forward with their own stories of discrimination across multiple airlines. "We're creating a centralized reporting system," Jasmine explained during a community forum. "Patterns that might go unnoticed when complaints are isolated become undeniable when viewed collectively." The foundation offered legal assistance to passengers pursuing complaints, psychological support for those traumatized by their experiences, and advocacy for stronger federal regulations protecting passenger rights. 6 months after the verdict, Malcolm and Jasmine prepared for another flight, their first since the incident. Skyline had implemented all the promised reforms, and Malcolm wanted to experience the results firsthand. As they boarded with Zara, now a toddler taking wobbly steps, they were greeted by a diverse flight crew led by a black female captain. The first-class cabin reflected similar diversity among both crew and passengers. Troy, now in a management role, had personally overseen the staffing for this symbolic flight. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Wright," the flight attendant said warmly, kneeling to offer Zara a small stuffed airplane. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." Throughout the flight, the service was impeccable, professional, attentive, and most importantly, consistent for all passengers regardless of appearance. Halfway through the journey, a flight attendant delivered a sealed envelope to their seats. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mr. and Mrs. Wright. Last month, I flew with my family to visit my elderly parents. For the first time in my life as a black man, I boarded a plane without that knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering how I'd be treated. The crew was respectful, helpful, and treated everyone with equal dignity. My children noticed the difference. Dad, my daughter said, flying is fun. I later learned about your fight to change Skyline's culture, and I wanted to thank you. Some battles are worth fighting, even at great personal cost. Gratefully. David Johnson." Jasmine wiped away tears as she passed the note to Malcolm. "This is why we did it," she whispered. In an unexpected epilogue, they received news about Karen Sutton. As part of her community service, she had been working with teenagers at the Westside Youth Center. Initially resistant and resentful, something had gradually shifted in her interactions with the young people. The center director reported that Karen had requested to continue volunteering after completing her required hours, and was now helping develop a program teaching hospitality skills to disadvantaged youth. "People can change when confronted with their biases," Malcolm observed when hearing the news. "Not everyone, not always, but it happens." On Zara's first birthday, Malcolm and Jasmine hosted a small celebration at home, grateful for the relative normalcy that had returned to their lives. As Zara took unsteady steps across the living room floor, Malcolm captured the moment on video, their daughter moving forward confidently, unaware of the barriers her parents had helped dismantle for her future. "You know," Jasmine said as they watched Zara explore, "someday she'll learn about what happened, probably in a history class or case study." Malcolm nodded. "And she'll know we didn't stay silent. That when pushed, we pushed back. Not just for her, but for everyone who deserves to move through the world with dignity." Outside their window, a Skyline plane traced a white arc across the blue sky, a company transformed, an industry on notice, and a family that had refused to accept anything less than justice. This story teaches us several powerful truths about confronting racism in modern America. First, discrimination often hides behind policies and protocols that appear neutral but target specific groups. Second, systems protect themselves. From HR departments burying complaints to media narratives painting victims as aggressors. Third, having resources matters enormously in fighting injustice. Malcolm and Jasmine's privilege as wealthy professionals allowed them to fight where others couldn't. Most importantly, this story reminds us that individual incidents of racism aren't isolated, they're symptoms of larger systems. Karen's slap wasn't just one bad employee having a bad day, it was the inevitable result of a culture that normalized treating black passengers differently. Real change required not just firing Karen, but transforming the entire airline's approach. The Wrights could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, they recognized their responsibility to use their position to create lasting change for everyone. Sometimes justice isn't just about personal vindication, it's about ensuring nobody else faces the same discrimination tomorrow. What would you have done in Malcolm and Jasmine's position? Would you have accepted the settlement for peace and privacy, or fought for systemic change like they did? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of people standing up against discrimination. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what everyday racism looks like and how it can be confronted with dignity and determination. Thank you for joining me on this journey of justice taking flight. Until next time.